Early morning. It was scarcely daylight when the National Guard choppers made their first ever view of the city. Though we didn't know it at the time, they were carrying the mayor, the police chief, and the city engineer, and two civil defense chiefs, all of them stunned to silence by what they saw. One of the officials was so shocked he later reported he hadn't even heard the sound of the rotators. That was the quiet helicopter ride I had ever taken, he said. All we knew for sure in our cramped little jail cell was that it was morning and we wanted out of there. We didn't wait to ask permission. We just went ahead and used the John, which sure enough had stopped flushing, then tiptoed out. Down below, Miss Minetti gave us dimes for the public phone so we could try to reach Grandma Hatch in the armory, but we struck out on both. Some calls are getting through, she told us, but if the lines are down, you won't get anything more than a busy signal. She had changed out of her uniform into slacks and was about to leave for the nearby town of Doniphan, where she lived, when she heard us talking amongst ourselves about walking to Kmart and the armory. She asked the policewoman at the desk if she shouldn't just drive us in her car. If we can't get through, it'll take them both home with me, she said. I hope not, though. I could see she halfway liked the idea. Before we knew it, she was herding us towards the same double-glass doors we'd walked through 5 and 6 hours ago. Outside, dawn shone as a gray and sodden world. It didn't look as if the sun would rise or set on anybody that 4th day of June. I'd always wondered what Grandpa meant when he said you can smell tornado weather. I've always been able to feel it. My clothes never really dry out. The humidity that morning must have been 90%. Or maybe it wasn't the weather right then. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was a lot more worried than I knew. For whatever reason, humidity or nerves, I found that the air heavy and musty and very hard to breathe. I finally knew what Grandpa was talking about. I can't remember much about going to the armory except that we got through without any trouble. Inside, there were people everywhere asleep on cots or just waking up. Stacy and Arthur led us straight past the gym and down a door hall to their dad's office. That's where we found Mrs. Darlington, looking really ashed, yelling at some operator on the phone. I'll never forget the expression on his face when he saw us. He grabbed up his kids as if they were featherweights, one in each arm, kissing and hugging them like crazy. We couldn't stop smiling, any of us. Mr. Darlington hugged me too, until I thought my ribs would crack. He's a great big man. Someone who doesn't know his own strength when it comes to a welterweight like me. Where were you? He asked. I got through to Dan's place, searched everywhere. The Millers told me they saw you leaving. That's all I had to go on. Miss Minetti explained about the jail, with the rest of us adding our 2 bits worth. Then he sent Stacy and Arthur off to find the rest of their family. No, he said he hadn't seen my dad or Aunt Goldie either. I just stood there, feeling worse by the minute as he and Miss Minetti went on talking. We no sooner turned to leave when back came Arthur to smack me a couple of good ones on the arm, finishing off what his dad had begun. See you, Hatch, he said, letting me grab him around the neck before he took off again. He was going to see more of me than ever in the days ahead, but neither of us knew it then. In no time at all, Miss Minetti and I were back in her Dodge en route to Kmart. I kept my fingers crossed all the way to the Highway 34. They nearly died when the National Guard Patrol wouldn't let us pass. Only after Minetti produced her official ID did he wave us around the other traffic, trying to enter the city. Approaching from this direction, she told me, we might just make it. When we got to South Locust and saw what loomed ahead of us in the early light, we changed our minds. The street was jammed with bulldozer trucks, emergency vehicles, National Guardsmen on foot. An ambulance train was trying to get through behind a piece of heavy equipment, wailing and wailing without making any headway. The familiar skyline was gone. Once sturdy buildings were now so many layers of rubble. The sight of those groaning bulldozers pushing the debris into piles made me sick to my stomach. I remembered that my dad would come in this way from Phillips if he came in. What would he think seeing all this? What would he think had happened to us? We tried another way, but he had to turn back because of downed wires and water. The next 2 streets were blocked as well. Finally, Miss Minetti pulled to the curb and parked. She looked at me a long time, shaking her head. I knew what she was going to say. I know you don't want to, but you'll have to come home with me, or let me take you back to the armory. Believe me, your mother wouldn't want you here. It's a war zone. Can I just walk to the Kmart? I begged her. It's not that far, you know. You don't know how my mom worries when she doesn't know where I am. Oh, Dan, her eyes filled up. I can't just leave you here. I already had the door open, glad she wasn't trying to stop me. I'll be okay, honest. Wait, she reached for me all right, but by then I was free. I waved at her and ran, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know why I was crying, but I was crying. Crying as hard as I ever had, crying and running, around the barricades, splashing through the low places, leaping over the kindling wood remains of somebody's house, dodging wires and draped crazy everywhere. I never stopped and I never looked back. I'm sure it wasn't yet 7 by the time I got to the 1600 block on Locust and spotted the Kmart. But everyone else seemed to have beat me. The parking lot was overflowing. There were news vans, guys with TV cameras, ambulances and fire trucks, and National Guard jeeps everywhere. Besides the rumbling engine, sounds on the walkie-talkies and CBs, and people shouting orders to come at me from all sides. I skirted along the edge of the parking lot, passing the Salvation Army van, the medics, and a row of chemical toilets to reach the store itself. My heart was pounding like crazy, but I didn't get there soon enough. After all, a guy wearing a hard hat stopped me. "Hey, son, don't go in there," he yelled at me. I whirled around. "My mom's here. I want to see her." He left the small loader he was riding and came over. "This is the official operations center. It's a CP now, the command post. Civilians are all gone." "They brought her here on a school bus," I cried breathlessly, starting to shake, starting to get mad. "Evacuated everyone during the night. Water's an inch deep in there. Too much damage," he started off. I put my face to the glass door, trying to look in, but he saw me. "Don't go in there now. You hear me?" I backed away. "Where'd they take everybody?" I called after him. All over. The armory, Bar Junior High, churches." He flung out his arm. "Everywhere. You'll have to make the rounds." "The armory?" I had good reason to cry now. I walked away so he wouldn't yell at me again. Then sat down on the curb, trying to decide what to do. There I was, smack dab in the middle of the CP, and I was worse off than ever. The parking lot blurred in front of my eyes. "Don't get mad," I told myself. "What's the use? And don't be a crybaby either. Just figure things out. You drove a police cruiser last night, remember? You can do whatever you have to." I wiped my face on my sleeve and took some deep breaths, trying to decide where Dad would go to look for us. He'd go home first, then after that, to the armory. If Mom was at the armory, sooner or later she'd run into the Darlingtons, and they would tell her I was okay. Maybe I should go home too. The armory was too far away. I looked up. Colors had grown brighter. Day was coming on fast. I noticed a Red Cross van that I hadn't seen before. I saw the first aid station. I zoomed right by, and the medics loading an ambulance. They were sloshing around in the water that was ankle deep in places. About then, a police car limped into the parking lot with his left rear tire flapping against the wet cement. A sight that would have cracked me up any other time. I was beginning to feel like a casualty myself, though I could see there was no place for ordinary survivors like me. A kid who can't find his parents isn't very high on the priority list. I stood up, stuffed my shirt in my jeans. I knew I could go back home, and if I crossed Fauner Park, it wouldn't be that long walk. The scary part was thinking, what was there to go back to? Not even Minerva. I knew it in my bones. Not even my cat would be there. But home base is home base, no matter how much it's been torn up. Just then, a whiff of coffee drifted toward me from the Salvation Army van. What a good smell. It was identical to what came out of our coffee maker every morning of my life. But I'd never thought about it before. Now I was thinking about it. Dad says he doesn't wake up until he's had a cup of brew. I guess the coffee was waking me up too, but in another way. It gave me hope, even in that thin little whiff I was getting, that things would be normal again. It was while cutting through the vast cement parking area of the racetrack, wondering why Fauner Park had so little damage, that I heard the sound of a truck accelerating somewhere behind me. 2 cars had already passed me. People were discovering they could get through this way. I'd been jogging and walking by turns, sailing over the few branches that were down, half wishing I'd had asked those Salvation Army ladies for a sandwich. Suddenly, the sound of that 5-liter engine behind me registered in my brain. It was my dad's pickup. Furthermore, I knew some spinal signal told me that he was driving. By the time they reached me, Mom and Dad and Ryan, I was jumping up and down and yelling. The pickup was still rolling when Dad leaped out of the driver's seat and lifted me off my feet. Mom was out next, her arms around us both, when Ryan squished in the middle. The dance we did right there on the Fauner Park racetrack could no way be choreographed, even by Aunt Goldie, who claimed she'd had 2 years of training in the East. We went on home from there, driving slow, through streets that were still being cleared. A tornado had been on the ground near Phillips, but thank God it had missed the farm. Flooding is going to be your grandpa's worst problem, Dad told us. The irrigation pivots are standing in a lake right now. Then I learned how Dad had finally made his way to the house around 1:15, how he'd spent the next desperate hours trying to find the rest of us. About 4:30 or so, he discovered Mom at the Presbyterian church, where she and Ryan and Smiley were sleeping on a rug in the minister's study. You kids were well hidden in that jail, Dad said after I told him about us. Everyone else was crowded into the underground shelter. I was there twice looking for you and your mother. He'd also gone to the armory, Stollery Park School, Civil Defense Headquarters, and 2 hospitals. When he finally found Mom at the church, it was Smiley who tried to convince him we'd all be all right. Don't you worry none about those kids, she said. They're sly as fox, those 3. Mark my words, they'll hold up somewhere just waiting for daybreak. I had to grin when Dad told me that. And then we were turning onto Sand Crane Drive, and I wanted to close my eyes in the worst way. The nightmare was true. I knew it. I'd braced myself for it. But by daylight, everything was worse than I expected. Dad angled the truck at the curb in front of our place and cut the engine. Nobody made a move to get out. We just sat there. I leaned it into Mom, toward Ryan, who was bent on exploring my ear. Dad finally broke the silence. "We'll be living on the farm a while," he said, in a voice scratchy as sandpaper.